Welcome to another deep dive into all things e-commerce. And this one, I gotta say, is powered by a tool that's all about boosting your sales, which is something I know we're all interested in, right? It's called Growth Suite. And Growth Suite helps you set up these really smart discount campaigns on your Shopify store. And the best part, you can try it out for free. Just pop over to the Shopify App Store and give it a whirl. But today we are zeroing in on a really critical aspect. This is for anyone running a Shopify store, or honestly, I think anyone who's ever sort of scratched their heads and wondered how some of those online stores just seem to, get more sales. We're going to talk about creating a data-driven strategy to boost your conversion rate, your store's conversion rate. So instead of just, crossing your fingers and hoping that people buy, we're going to use information, hard data to make it happen.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's a frustration. I've seen it, so many store owners grapple with it. You look at those sort of average conversion rates floating around out there, for Shopify stores, and they tend to hover around this 1 to 3% range, something like that. But then you hear about these, top performers hitting 3.2%, even higher, and you wonder, what's their secret? Well, it isn't some, magic formula or anything. It's all about a deliberate data-backed approach. So it's not just about gathering every single data point, right? It's about being really smart. Yeah. You want to focus on what we call actionable metrics, things like those, micro conversions you might have heard of. And the reason these are so powerful is they actually point you to the bottlenecks in your customer's journey. Like, where are people getting stuck?
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So you're saying it's about finding those pressure points. And in this deep dive, we're going to walk you through that whole thought process, right? Like how to shift your thinking. You're going to be a data-driven conversion rate optimization expert by the time we're done. We're going to look at setting up your analytics. This is, like an early warning system so you can see what's happening on your store. Then we'll look at segmenting your customer data. Are there patterns you're missing? Then a complete store audit to figure out what's working and what's totally not working. And we got to talk about A/B testing.
Oh, yeah. A/B testing, that's essential. It's like, how else are you going to prove what works, right?
Right. So you're not just guessing.
Exactly. And we'll go even further. We'll talk about the specifics,
Yeah.
Optimizing those product pages, because that's often where the magic happens. Then that checkout process. So many people get to the checkout and then poof, they're gone. We'll get into that. Oh, and psychological principles, using psychology ethically, of course, to nudge people in the right direction. Then personalization. So your store feels like it's made just for each person who visits. And mobile optimization. I mean, come on, everyone's on their phones these days. We can't ignore that. Content, how you write and present information, and even the technical stuff, like how fast your site loads. All of this plays a role. And we're going to look at how data can guide every single decision.
Wow. Okay, we've got a lot to cover, but it sounds incredibly valuable.
Oh, it is. It's like having a roadmap to success, except the map's made of data.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So before we get lost in all the details, let's take a step back and really understand the core principles of data-driven CRO.
Absolutely. So what's really cool about this whole data-driven approach is it completely changes how you think about your business. It takes you away from that, gut feeling thing like, oh, I have a hunch this will work, which, let's be honest, sometimes works out, sometimes it's a disaster. But data-driven CRO, it shifts you into this, I know this works because, look, the numbers show it. That's what's at the heart of it.
So it's taking the emotion out of it.
In a way, yeah. It's about using logic, using proof.
Makes sense. And I know you mentioned before that it's not just about that final purchase, right? What are some of the other key things to be keeping an eye on?
Yeah. So yes, of course, your overall conversion rate is really important. That's, the big picture, the percentage of visitors who end up buying something. But it's a bit like just looking at the tip of the iceberg. To really get a clear picture of what's going on, you got to look beneath the surface. You got to be tracking things like how often people add stuff to their cart. That's your add to cart rate. Then, how many of those people actually finish the checkout process? That's your checkout completion rate. And then how much are people spending on average per purchase? That's your average order value. See, by looking at these specific numbers, they reveal these little roadblocks, these points of friction in your sales process. And you're not going to see these if you're just looking at that overall conversion rate.
Okay, so that's a good point. You might have a decent overall conversion rate, but still be leaving money on the table because there's a bottleneck somewhere else.
Exactly.
So you mentioned actionable metrics earlier. These are like the specific numbers that actually tell you what to focus on.
Precisely. They're the ones that give you those, oh, I see what's happening here moments.
And these are the ones that we can actually use to, take action and improve things.
Okay, so those quantitative metrics. Those numbers tell you what people are doing. But how do you figure out why they're doing it?
Ah, good question. That's where we need to bring in the other side of data, the qualitative side. Quantitative, as you said, that's the numbers, the stats. It answers the what. But qualitative, that's about understanding the why. It's like looking at the story behind the numbers. This comes from things like, actual feedback from your customers through surveys or maybe recordings of them using your site. You watch how they navigate, where they get stuck, that kind of thing. You need both of these, they work together. Quantitative points to the problems and qualitative gives you clues on how to solve them.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So you've got a handle on what's happening and why. What's the next step? All right, so before you go making any changes, you've got to set a baseline. This is like your starting point for all those key metrics we've been talking about. You need to know where you are now so you can measure how far you've come later on.
It's like if you don't know where you started, you can't really tell how much progress you've made.
Exactly. So once you've got your baselines, then you can set some really clear, measurable goals. And I'm not talking about just vague goals like, oh, I want to sell more. That's too broad. You need to be specific. Like, I want to increase my checkout completion rate by, let's say, 15% in the next 3 months. That's measurable. That's something you can track.
That's a data-driven goal. Yeah.
Exactly. Data-driven. So you've got your baseline, your data-driven goals. Now what? Well, it's not about just randomly changing things and hoping for the best. You need a system.
Okay, so what's the system? How do you approach making improvements?
It's like a scientific approach, really. It's a cycle. So first, you gather and analyze your data. Based on what you see, you form a hypothesis. Think of it as an educated guess about what change might improve things. Then you test that hypothesis right. You make the change, you track the results, you compare it against your baseline. Did it work? If it did, great, you implement that change. And then guess what? You start the cycle all over again. New hypothesis, new test. It never really ends.
So it's this ongoing process of testing and improving, always using data to guide the decisions.
Exactly. And this system is so valuable because it prevents you from making those, gut feeling changes that could actually make things worse. You're always backing up your decisions with data.
So you're not just shooting in the dark anymore.
Exactly. You're taking aim with a laser pointer.
Nice. Okay, so we're being methodical. But I'm curious, how much of an impact can these small improvements actually make?
Bro, you'd be surprised. It's easy to think, 0.5% increase in conversion rate. Who cares? But you got to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Think about how many visitors your site gets, your average order value. That small percentage, over time, it can mean thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars in extra revenue. It really adds up.
So those tiny tweaks can have a huge impact on the bottom line.
Absolutely. Don't underestimate them.
Okay, so we understand the why behind data-driven CRO. We need to be data-driven. We need to test our changes. Now, how do we actually start gathering this essential data? Let's talk about setting up that analytics infrastructure, kind of like building that CRO command center you need.
Exactly. Think of your analytics setup as like your store's radar system. It lets you see everything that's happening, all the activity across your site. Now, the absolute must-have for any Shopify store owner, the foundation, is Google Analytics. But it's not just enough to have it. You got to make sure you set up what's called enhanced e-commerce within Google Analytics.
Okay, so what does that do? What's so special about enhanced e-commerce?
Well, think of it like unlocking this super detailed view within Google Analytics. It lets you track the entire customer journey through your store. You can see exactly where people are dropping off during the shopping process, not just when they reach the final checkout. So you're getting this complete picture of your sales funnel, like where are the leaks, where are people getting stuck. It's incredibly powerful.
So you're saying it's not just about seeing how many people buy, but seeing where they get lost along the way.
Precisely. It's about understanding those little hiccups in the customer journey.
That makes sense. Now, Shopify also has its own analytics, right? Should we be using those as well?
Absolutely. Don't ignore Shopify Analytics. It might not be quite as, in-depth as Google Analytics, but it still provides really valuable metrics specific to your Shopify store. It's great for getting a quick overview of your sales trends and some basic customer behavior right within your Shopify dashboard.
So it's a good starting point.
Exactly. And honestly, the best approach is to use both. Google Analytics for those deep dives into your funnel, and Shopify Analytics for a quick snapshot of how things are going.
Okay, so we've got Google Analytics with enhanced e-commerce setup. We're keeping an eye on Shopify Analytics. What's next? What other tools do we need in our arsenal?
Okay, so to make your life easier, especially when you start dealing with tracking codes and all that technical stuff, there's a tool called Google Tag Manager. Think of it like a central hub where you can manage all your different tags without having to mess around with your website's code directly.
So it's kind of like a control panel for all those little bits of code that track things.
Exactly. Makes setting up analytics and other marketing stuff so much simpler. Now, we also need to talk about behavior analysis tools. These are amazing for really understanding how people interact with your store.
Okay, so what kind of tools are we talking about here?
Well, there are a few different types. There are heat maps, which basically give you this visual representation of where people are clicking on your site, how they're moving their mouse around, how far down the page they're scrolling. It's like seeing your website through your visitor's eyes. Then there are session recordings, which let you actually watch recordings of real people using your store, of course anonymized, so you're not seeing their personal information. This can be so eye-opening because you might see people getting stuck in places you didn't even realize were problematic. And then you have form analytics, which focus specifically on those checkout forms where, let's be honest, a lot of people tend to abandon their carts. These tools can pinpoint exactly which fields are causing people to hesitate or make mistakes.
So these tools can really help you find those hidden stumbling blocks that might be costing you sales.
Exactly. You can't fix what you don't know is broken, right?
Right. And with so much website traffic coming from mobile phones these days, I imagine analyzing mobile behavior specifically is super important.
It's absolutely crucial. I mean, think about it. Over 70% of traffic to Shopify stores often comes from mobile devices. That's huge. But the way people use your site on their phones is completely different from how they use it on a desktop computer. They're scrolling differently, they're tapping instead of clicking, their attention spans are shorter. So you have to understand those differences and optimize your site accordingly.
So what are some key things to consider for mobile?
You've got to make sure your site loads super fast on mobile connections. Mobile users are notoriously impatient. If your site takes more than 3 seconds to load, you're going to lose them. So you need to optimize your images, the way your site's code is structured, everything. And then think about how you're presenting your content. Is it easy to read on a small screen? Are your buttons big enough to tap easily? Are those key calls to action, like the Add to Cart button, easy to find and use?
So you're basically saying treat mobile almost like a separate website.
In a way, yes. It deserves its own attention and optimization strategy. And on top of that, you've also got to think about cross-device tracking. These days, people are often browsing on their phones, adding items to their cart on their tablets, and then maybe finally making the purchase on their laptop. So understanding how people are moving between devices and making sure that experience is seamless is really important.
So all this data is coming from different sources. How do we make sure it's not just a bunch of random numbers floating around? How do we integrate it all into a cohesive picture?
Yeah, that's where data integration best practices come in. First, you want to make sure you're using UTM parameters consistently across all your marketing channels. These are little tags you add to your links that tell Google Analytics exactly where your traffic is coming from, so you can see, for example, if a particular Facebook ad is driving a lot of conversions. Then you want to use unique customer identifiers so you can track a single customer's journey across your different platforms. And finally, you want to create custom dashboards that pull together the most important data points from Google Analytics, Shopify Analytics, and any other tools you're using. That way, you have this one central place where you can get a clear overview of how everything's performing.
So it's about creating this unified view of your data instead of having it all siloed off in different places.
Exactly. That's the key to making smarter decisions.
Okay, so our analytics foundation is in place, data's coming in. Now, how do we really start to make sense of it all? And more importantly, understand our customers on a deeper level. That's where customer segmentation comes into play, right?
Exactly. You've got it. The idea is you're not treating every customer the same. That's a recipe for disaster. Instead, you're using data to divide your audience into these smaller, more targeted groups. It's like, personalized marketing, but amplified.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So how do we go about segmenting our customer data? What are some of the main ways?
Lots of ways. Demographics are a good starting point. Age, gender, location, where are your customers from, what language do they speak. Then look at where your traffic's coming from. Are they finding you through Google searches, social media, or maybe directly typing in your website address? This can tell you a lot about which marketing channels are actually working. Then there's the device type. Are they on their phones, tablets, or desktop computers? That can influence how they interact with your store. Shopping behavior is another big one. Are they first-time visitors or loyal repeat customers? Are they just browsing or actually buying? And finally, their purchase history. How much do they typically spend? What kinds of products are they interested in? All this information is gold.
Okay, so we've divided our customers into these different groups. What do we do with that information? How do we actually analyze it?
All right, so once you've got your segments, the next step is to really focus on the high-value ones, the ones that are bringing in the most money or have the potential to.
So like your VIP customers.
Exactly. You want to understand them inside and out. Figure out their customer lifetime value, which is essentially how much revenue they're likely to generate for your business over their entire time as a customer. And then analyze their conversion rates. Are they converting at a higher rate than other segments? That's valuable information. And also figure out how much it costs to acquire those customers. Are they worth the investment? Maybe you discover that people coming from Instagram are twice as likely to buy as your average customer, or maybe people who buy a certain product tend to come back and buy more. These are the kinds of insights that can really drive your marketing and product strategies.
That's fascinating. So we're really getting granular here, really digging into the data to see who our best customers are and how to appeal to them more effectively.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it goes even further. The source talks about using data for something called journey mapping.
Okay, journey mapping. What's that all about?
Well, it's basically using your analytics data to create a visual map of the paths that different customer segments take through your store from the first moment they arrive to that glorious final purchase.
So it's like tracing their footsteps through the website.
Exactly. And by mapping out those paths for your high-converting customers, you can see what steps they're taking, what elements of your site are really working to guide them towards a purchase. And then on the flip side, by mapping out the journeys of those segments that aren't converting so well, you can pinpoint exactly where they're dropping off, where they're getting frustrated, where they're hitting those roadblocks.
So you can see where those leaks in your funnel are and then hopefully plug them up.
Exactly. It's like having X-ray vision into your customer experience. And another powerful tool is cohort analysis. This helps you understand how well you're retaining customers over time, which is crucial for any sustainable business.
So how does cohort analysis work?
You basically group your customers based on when they first made a purchase, like everyone who bought something in January, for example. And then you track their behavior over time. How often are they coming back to buy again? How much are they spending in total? This gives you a really good sense of your customer lifetime value and whether your CRO efforts are actually building loyalty.
That's super valuable for the long-term health of any business. So we've talked about a lot of different ways to segment and analyze customer data. Any final thoughts on this before we move on?
Just one important thing. Don't get too carried away with creating a million different segments. It can be tempting to get super granular, but you risk spreading your data too thin and ending up with analysis paralysis.
So keep it focused.
Yes, exactly. The source recommends focusing on like 3 to 5 key segments that represent a good chunk of your traffic or your revenue. That way, you can really dig deep and get those actionable insights.
Okay, so we've got our analytics set up, we've segmented our data, we're understanding our customers. What's next? How do we really zero in on specific areas for improvement on our store?
Okay, so now it's time to put on our detective hats and do a comprehensive audit of your Shopify store.
Okay, a store audit. So we're going through everything with a fine-tooth comb.
Exactly. You're examining every nook and cranny of your online presence, looking at it through the lens of all this data you've been collecting. You want to find out what's working well, of course, but more importantly, what's holding you back from achieving your full sales potential.
So where do we start? What are the key areas to focus on during this audit?
First things first, technical performance. This is crucial. Check how quickly your pages are loading, especially on mobile devices. Remember, speed is key. If your site takes forever to load, people are going to bounce. Analyze how your conversion rates are doing across different devices. Are mobile users struggling? Look for errors, broken links, anything that could frustrate a customer and make them leave.
So the technical stuff is important. But what about the actual experience of using the site? The user experience, or UX, as they call it.
That's the next piece of the puzzle. You want to use all that behavior data you've gathered from those tools we talked about earlier, those heat maps, session recordings, and all that good stuff. Analyze them to see how people are actually interacting with your site. Are they trying to click on things that aren't clickable? Are they missing important buttons? Are they just scrolling right past key content? These are all signs that something's not quite right.
So it's about uncovering those points of friction or confusion that you might not even realize are there.
Exactly. And then, of course, you've got to analyze your conversion funnel itself. This is where you map out every single step in your purchase process and figure out exactly where people are dropping off. Are there particular pages with high exit rates? Are people abandoning their carts at specific points in the checkout? Are there issues when people switch between devices during their shopping journey?
So we're really trying to understand every step the customer takes and where they're most likely to get tripped up.
Exactly. And it's also helpful to compare your performance to other stores in your industry. What are the typical conversion rates, cart abandonment rates, and page load times for successful businesses in your niche?
So it's about benchmarking your performance against the industry standards.
Exactly. It gives you some context for your own results and helps you identify areas where you might be falling behind. And the final step in your audit is prioritizing all those opportunities for improvement that you've identified.
Okay, so we found the problems. How do we decide which ones to tackle first?
Think about it like this. You've got a to-do list, but you can't do everything at once. You've got to figure out what's most urgent and important. Look at the potential impact of each improvement, like how much could it increase your revenue? Then consider how much effort it will take to actually implement the fix. And finally, how easily can you test the potential solutions? So you're focusing on the high-impact, low-effort, easy-to-test changes first.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where you can get the biggest wins with the least amount of effort.
Exactly. It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Okay, so our audit is complete. We've got a list of prioritized improvements. Now, how do we go about actually fixing those problems in a way that we can be confident will work? That's where A/B testing comes into play, right?
Yeah, got it. A/B testing is like the ultimate tool for eliminating guesswork in CRO. It's like having a scientific lab for your website.
Okay, love that analogy. So walk us through how it works.
So instead of just making a change and hoping it works, you're systematically comparing two versions of a page or element to see which one actually performs better with your real customers.
So it's a head-to-head competition.
Exactly. It's like, okay, version A, version B, fight. And then you see which one comes out on top.
So how do we actually set up a successful A/B testing program? What are the essential steps?
Okay, first, you need to choose a good A/B testing tool that plays nicely with your Shopify store. There are some popular options out there like Google Optimize, VWO, Convert. Do some research, find one you like. Then, and this is crucial, you've got to document everything. For every test you run, write down your hypothesis, what are you changing, and why do you think it'll make a difference?
So it's like keeping a lab notebook, meticulously recording every experiment.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have to define what success looks like. What are you measuring? Is it click-through rate, conversion rate, add-to-cart rate? Be clear on your metrics from the start.
So we're setting the rules of the game. And what about making sure our tests are actually reliable? I know the Force talks a lot about statistical validity.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. So to be sure your results aren't just flukes, you've got to calculate something called sample size. It basically tells you how many visitors need to see each version of your test for the results to be meaningful.
So it's like making sure you have enough data points to draw a reliable conclusion.
Exactly. And then you need to figure out how long to run the test. This is where a lot of people trip up. They end their test too early and they get misleading results. Most tests need to run for at least a week, maybe two, and generate hundreds of conversions to be statistically sound.
Okay, so patience is key. Don't jump the gun and declare a winner too soon.
Right. Let the data speak for itself, and then you need to decide how to split your traffic. What percentage of visitors will see each version? Usually it's a 50-50 split.
Okay, so we've got our testing tool. We've documented our hypothesis. We've got a plan for how long to run the test and how to split our traffic.
Yeah.
Now, we probably have a ton of different things we could test. How do we decide which ones to prioritize?
A great framework for prioritizing is the PIE framework: potential, importance, ease. So you look at each test idea and ask, what's its potential to really move the needle on your conversion rate? How important is the page or element you're testing? Is it something that gets a lot of traffic? And how easy is it to actually set up and run the test? Ideally, you want tests that are high potential, high importance, and low effort.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot where you can get the biggest bang for your buck.
Exactly. Now, there are a few different types of A/B tests you can run. The most basic is a simple A/B test, where you're just comparing two versions of a single element, like changing the color of a button or the wording of a headline. Then you have split URL testing, where you're comparing two entirely different page designs. And then you have multivariate testing, where you're testing multiple elements on a page at the same time. But that one gets pretty complex and requires a lot of traffic.
Okay, so we've run our test, we've gathered enough data. How do we know when we have a winner? How do we interpret the results?
The key is to wait until your test reaches statistical significance, which is usually around a 95% confidence level. This basically means you can be pretty darn sure that the results you're seeing aren't just random chance. And it's important to run the test for a full business cycle, at least a week, to account for any differences in customer behavior depending on the day of the week.
So don't just look at the numbers after a day or two.
No. Be patient. Let the data accumulate. And don't just focus on that one primary metric you set. Look at any secondary effects too, like maybe a change that increases your conversion rate also decreases your average order value. That's something you need to know. And finally, segment your results. See if the changes have different impacts on different groups of customers. What works for mobile users might not work for desktop users.
Okay, so we're being thorough. We're looking at the whole picture. Now, let's dive into some specific areas of the Shopify store that are prime candidates for optimization. Let's start with the product page, which is really like your digital salesperson. What are some data-driven strategies we can use here?
All right, so the product page, this is where the magic happens or doesn't happen. It's where people decide whether or not to buy, so you got to make sure it's optimized. One key area is your product images. Use those heat maps we talked about to see how people are interacting with them. Are they zooming in? Are they looking at all the images? Test different things. Test the number of images you show. 3 to 7 is usually a good range. Test the types of images, like lifestyle shots versus product shots. Test the angles, the zoom functionality, see what people respond to.
So it's about making sure the images are really showcasing the product in the best possible light.
Exactly. You want those images to be working hard for you. Now let's talk about the product description itself. You can track how far down the page people are scrolling to see if they're actually reading the whole thing.
So if they're not scrolling, maybe the description is too long or not engaging enough.
Could be. So test different formats. Are bullet points better than paragraphs? Experiment with language. Does talking about the benefits of the product work better than just listing features? See what resonates with your audience.
And what about that all-important add to cart button, the call to action?
Oh, that's crucial. Test different wording. Add to cart. Buy now, something more creative. Test the placement. Should it be above the fold, below the fold? Look at those heat maps again to see where people are naturally drawn to. And think about the design, the size, the color, the shape. All these things can have an impact. And on mobile, consider making it a sticky button that stays on the screen as people scroll.
So it's always visible and easy to tap. Good tip. Now, I know social proof is huge these days. Reviews, testimonials, that kind of thing. How can we use data to make sure we're using social proof effectively on our product pages?
Yeah, social proof is like gold. It builds trust. So you want to test where you place those reviews. Do they have more impact near the top of the page or further down? Test how many you show. Should you be highlighting your star rating? Test different formats. Do customer photos work better than just text reviews? And consider using those customers also bought recommendations. Your purchase data can tell you which products are frequently bought together, so use that information to your advantage.
So it's about finding those little nudges that help people feel more confident about making a purchase.
And one last question on product pages. How do we encourage customers to spend a bit more?
Ah, yes, the art of the upsell and cross-sell. Again, look at your purchase data to see which products are often bought together or which ones are a higher-end version of what someone's currently looking at. Test different placements for these suggestions below the product description, in a sidebar, in a pop-up. See what works best. And don't forget to optimize for mobile. What looks great on a desktop might be a nightmare on a small screen.
Okay, our product pages are optimized. People are adding items to their carts. But we all know that doesn't always mean they'll actually complete the purchase. Cart abandonment is a huge problem for a lot of stores. So how do we use data to plug the leaks in our checkout process? Okay, the checkout process. This is like the final hurdle, and it's where things can go wrong really easily. Even tiny little things can cause people to abandon their carts. So you got to make it as smooth and painless as possible. First, you want to map out every single step in your checkout funnel, from the moment someone clicks checkout to the final confirmation page. Analyze the drop-off rate at each step. Where are people leaving? Compare completion rates across different devices and browsers. Are there technical issues on certain platforms? And look at how long people are spending on each step. If they're taking forever, it might mean they're confused or frustrated.
So it's about finding those points of friction and then smoothing them out.
Exactly. Now, one area that's ripe for optimization is your checkout forms. Use form analytics.